The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Brought to you by the National Cannabis Coalition.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
All right, good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. We have made it to the weekend. It is Friday, August 10th, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for being here with us. We are 1 week away from our live coverage of Seattle Hemp Fest. 3 days of fun and frivolity, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, next weekend. Make sure you log in to ncr420.com. We'll start the festivities as close to noon as we can, and we'll run as far into 8 o'clock as we can as well. So 3 days, 8 hours a day, live coverage. We'll have music, speakers, interviews, coverage of panels, and of course, all the vendors and the fun that happens at 3 days of 150,000 like-minded stoners, all gathered in 1.6 miles of park with 6 stages. Let me tell you, if you can make it, you need to go there. We got all sorts of fun to get to, but first, let's introduce everybody we got here in the studio. First of all, at the engineer's desk, we got Wiz Kaliko hanging out. Hi, Kaliko.
Aloha. It is Friday. It is such a gorgeous day.
Yes, it is. And you're getting your Mac back.
Oh my God. My MacBook Pro, which has been out of commission since the LA High Times Cup, is finally coming home to Papa. I'm pretty stoked about
it's going to be a good time for Kaliko. Also here in the studio, we got Brian the Red hanging out. How you doing, Brian?
I am here, and we are live.
We are live, man. Good to have you here. Oh, and you got a big wave cresting behind you.
Oh, it must be left over. Oh.
Left over from the Irie Island Hour.
Island Hour.
That's right. So, and also from our virtual studio in Grastoria, Oregon, we have our news director, Cannabis Carrie. Hi, Carrie.
Hello. Happy Friday. Oh, my gosh, it's Friday.
I know. You're almost running out of Olympics.
I know. But that's okay. There's plenty of Olympic stories. And hey, Russ, I'm getting ready for Rio.
Oh, that's right. Rio in 2016. I got four years to prepare.
Right.
So stock up.
Plus, it's football season.
That's right. We watched a little bit of preseason football yesterday. Got to see Peyton Manning's first drive as a Denver Bronco, which ended with him getting intercepted by the Chicago Bears at the goal line. So talk about bittersweet for me. I didn't know what to think about that. But we'll talk about all that stuff on future shows. Right now, we got to get to the news, and Cannabis Carrie's got the headlines that we'll talk right about after this first break. What's in the news today?
Well, today I'm going to talk, go outside of the borders of the country. We brought it up an hour or two a couple times this week, but we're going to talk about a South American country who is very progressive on their ideas about legalization. Also, I have a whole bunch of nonsense to tell you about some government officials down in Arizona. I'll let you know all about that. But first up, I'm going to tell you about the newest endorsement from Octa.
All right. Good news. More endorsements of marijuana legalization here in the state of Oregon. We always like to hear that. Thanks, Carrie. Also on today's show at 20 after, it is Rockin' Friday for our Daily Toker Tunes, and I'm going to be taking the reins of Rockin' Friday today because I believe Herb is out at the String Summit this weekend, so I'll have to take care of the music. We're going to bring you some music from Gypsy Hawk, and the song is called The Fields. I believe they're one of the bands performing at Seattle Hemp Fest, if I'm not mistaken. Then at half past, we are going to be talking with Dave Bienenstock, the West Coast editor of High Times magazine, for our High Times issue preview. We always do this on the second Friday of the month, and this issue is special. It's High Times' first ever Dabs cover. It's a pretty landmark. We'll be talking about that with Dave Bienenstock, plus the High Times Medical Marijuana Quarterly magazine. And then at the end of the show, time for some radical rant, some more nonsense against marijuana legalization from both pro and anti-marijuana people. This is the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back. Stick around.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Support the Russ Belville Show. Text the word Russ to 420-420 and connect with the National Cannabis Coalition. You can also send $10 to the Russ Belville Show right from your smartphone. That's Russ to 420-420. You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show. Marijuana is not going to re-legalize itself. You've got to do your part. Join the National Cannabis Coalition today at nationalcannabiscoalition.com. Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, ganja sacrament, consumer cannabis. The topic of marijuana is heating up the news, and the Russ Belville Show catches you up with today's latest headlines. Now, here's our senior news editor, Cannabis Carey, with the Daily Cannabis Chronicle.
The effort to legalize marijuana for adults in the state of Oregon just got another political endorsement. The regional conference of the NAACP has decided to endorse the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, now known as Measure 80. If passed in November, Measure 80 would legalize the cultivation, distribution, and sales of marijuana for adults that are at least 21 years old. Oscar Easton Jr., the president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Northwest Area Conference, said yesterday, quote, "We need to end the drug war immediately and replace it with a common sense approach. I call on Oregon's business, civic, and especially its religious leaders to add their voices to the coalition getting behind Oregon Measure 80. Now, the regional NAACP is the latest group to endorse OCTA. They will join the Pacific Green Party of Oregon, NORML, SSDP, and the United Food Commercial Workers 555, among others.
All right, we got NAACP endorsement for Measure 80, bringing all of Oregon's 6 black voters to our side. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Portland, Oregon, though, statistically speaking, is the least black. It's the whitest major American city in the United States, which was kind of surprising for me to find out because coming from Boise, Idaho, it's like United Colors of Benetton out here. So, no, this is good news. Just NAACP endorsing this further illustrates the fact that marijuana legalization is a civil rights issue. It is a race relations issue. It is an economic issue. And we're going to see more groups getting behind marijuana legalization as they realize it's safer and safer to do so. United Food and Commercial Workers Unions starting to realize that, hey, there's not too many growth industries for labor out there besides the medical marijuana dispensaries and growers and producers that have been cropping up, pardon the pun, in the western states. So we got unions on board, we're getting civil rights organizations on board, and we're starting to get Democratic parties of certain states, Texas Democratic Party, supporting these kinds of measures. So the momentum is building, the wind is at our backs. It's never been a better time to be a marijuana legalizer.
And we reported to you earlier this year that the South American country of Uruguay is pushing forward efforts to legalize cannabis use in the country. In March, demonstrators took to the streets and protested outside of the Supreme Court in Uruguay, shouting, "No more prisoners for plants." The supporters of that growing movement, called Movement for the Liberation of Cannabis, were demanding that the Supreme Court address the ambiguity of the law that punishes traffickers and prohibits any cultivation of the plant, but exempts those that possess a reasonable amount for personal cannabis. That law has led police to be able to decide if a person has a reasonable amount or not for arrest, leading to civilian and police conflicts and room for corruption. It is up to a judge's discretion to rule if the police found you with an amount that is for personal use or enough to be guilty of marijuana sales. Uruguay has been fighting for cannabis law reform very actively since 2010, when a bill was submitted to Parliament to decriminalize cultivation and harvesting for personal use. Marijuana is the most commonly consumed illicit substance in Uruguay. That law narrowly missed the mark of setting 25 grams in 8 plants as the standard threshold of a personal amount. A bill that was given to Uruguay's Congress this week goes much further. Uruguay's president, Jose Mujica, has signed into a proposal that would not only legalize marijuana in the country, but would have the government take over the distribution of marijuana sales, hoping to make $30 to $40 million a year. If passed, the progressive law would create a government department that would oversee marijuana imports. Yes, imports. There is language to support imports of marijuana from other countries, also production, cultivation, sales, and distribution of cannabis. The text of the law declares that the war on drugs is a colossal failure in Uruguay, saying that marijuana is different from cocaine, alcohol, tobacco, and psychotropic drugs. Since cannabis use is already legal in Uruguay, the bill aims at spending some of its profits to alert the public on the dangers of cannabis as well, saying the bill's framework is intended as damage reduction and not encouraging use. Now, on another note, in the text, it estimates that the government would need to produce about 60,000 pounds of cannabis to meet the country's demands. President Mujica has said that he will not push for the plan unless he sees the support of legalization of cannabis to go over 60%. Now, the bill lists the law's goals to include, quote, the normalization and full societal acceptance of marijuana use, so that consumers aren't stigmatized nor treated as criminals. It would also create a national drug council to, quote, help facilitate reflection about those goals of societal acceptance. The legislation calls levels of use of cannabis in Uruguay has an important level of legitimacy in Uruguayan society. Now, the law still has a long way to go, and support is divided in the Uruguayan Congress, but we will be keeping a very close eye on this one, Russ.
Yeah, South America, Latin America, Central America, these countries are coming to realize through necessity here that they're going to have to do something different. They cannot continue with the criminalization of trafficking, the criminalization of cultivation, and the criminalization of possession and use of drugs by the people. It's subverting their very democracies in these countries. They're having trouble keeping their police forces filled with people that are willing to do the job, and the police that are there are so corrupt that it's hard to tell who's on what side anymore. It's no surprise to see Uruguay and other countries here making this change. And in another South American country, just looking up some other news on this, the marijuana debate is going on in Chile as well. This comes from the Americas magazine, which is published by the Council of the Americas. And the hype began because one of their senators, who's named Fulvio Rossi, admitted in an interview in a newspaper that he smokes marijuana 2 or 3 times a month. This is a senator in a country admitting he smokes currently 2 to 3 times a month. The Chilean politicians now are trying, some of his opponents are trying to revive a bill that would remove politicians from public office if they're caught using illegal drugs. Senator Rossi's introduced a bill of his own that would decriminalize home cultivation of marijuana for personal or therapeutic use. He says that bringing this above ground would break the backs of the drug traffickers. And yet in Chile, like in America, it is considered what they call Group 1 drug. It's scheduled up alongside cocaine and heroin. Of course, in America, cocaine is a Schedule 2. But, once again, we're seeing more South American countries, more Latin American countries, these countries that are affected by our drug war, the places where we've exported the violence that naturally occurs under prohibition. They're beginning to revolt, and they're beginning to look at legalization.
An Arizona County prosecutor and a county attorney have both come out to express their opposition to medical marijuana dispensaries and their plans to restrict them in their respective communities. Yavapai County prosecutor Sheila Polk has penned a proposal to the Board of Supervisors that would add a line to the state law on county zoning. She wants to add one sentence to clarify that the cultivation of marijuana is not considered an agricultural operation. Her reasons, she says, are because agricultural operations can be exempt from county zoning laws so they can be located near a school or a church. Polk wants to make sure that medical marijuana growing operations must stay clear of those sensitive areas. Sheila Polk wrote a letter to Governor Jan Brewer a few weeks ago, a letter that she had signed by 13 county attorneys, asking her to halt the licensing of marijuana for any purpose. She falsely tells Governor Brewer that the newly appointed U.S. Attorney for Arizona, John Leondo, is prepared to close any dispensary as soon as they open. Governor Brewer, who has been ordered by a judge to allow the voter-approved law to go forward, answered the county attorneys by saying that although she has concerns with the law, the voters have spoken. Meanwhile, Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery has openly said that any medical marijuana dispensaries that open in his county could face criminal prosecution. Maricopa County seat is the capital of this state. Phoenix is the 12th largest city in the U.S. by land area, and with 1.5 million residents, the most populous state capital in the U.S. as well. Now, the majority of those 97 dispensaries that were recently approved to be open in the state will be in the greater Phoenix area. At least 80 of the accepted by lottery applications were approved for that area. Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery says that he cannot ignore that possession, sales, and cultivation of marijuana is illegal under federal law. Montgomery cites Arizona Attorney General Tom Horn's recent opinion piece that key portions of the Arizona medical marijuana law are preempted by federal law. Now, after the lottery that picked 97 dispensaries that will be allowed to go forward with their business plans, Montgomery said that anyone involved with growing marijuana should stop, and that his office would be reviewing any cases brought to them by law enforcement for possible prosecution.
All right. Officials of the state of Arizona, from Governor Brewer to the Attorney General to the Sheriff of Maricopa County to the dog catcher to the person who's a precinct committee person in District 3 of Phoenix, Arizona. Attention, all of you. Your job is not to enforce federal law. What federal law says about marijuana doesn't mean 0.2 of a tick's turd in your jurisdiction. Your job is to enforce state and county and local laws and ordinances. The Attorney General saying that the Arizona medical marijuana law conflicts with certain parts of federal law, that's Attorney General Eric Holder's problem. That's not Attorney General Bill in Arizona's problem. That's not Governor Brewer in Arizona's problem. You people need to understand what federalism is and understand what the votes of the people in your state mean. The fact that you don't like medical marijuana, the fact that the vote didn't go your way, doesn't mean you get to turn to Uncle Sam and say, oh, we don't like it, it's against federal law. Well, tough titty, it's against federal law. Your job is not to enforce federal law. To hear this sheriff in Maricopa County saying, well, if any of these dispensaries open up, we're going to bust them. They're legal under the state law. Your state officials just held a lottery for this. A state lottery to be able to determine who are qualified to be able to open up these dispensaries. I'm reading another story here from the Payson Roundup in Arizona, where they're talking about the Gila County attorney, Daisy Flores. She says that Arizona voters, quote, Arizona voters determined that dispensaries should be permitted if in compliance with our Arizona law. As county attorney, I must respect the will of the people, end quote. And that is the right answer. That you need to turn to this Gila County prosecutor, this Daisy Flores, for your lessons here on how federal and state law jurisdictions work. She continues to say, quote, essentially the issuance of the registry identification is not preempted, as it is not authorizing any violation of federal law. Therefore, while we have decriminalized for Arizona law the offenses of possession, use, or cultivation of marijuana for someone who lawfully holds a registry identification card, state law is preempted by federal law, and it is still a federal crime to cultivate, sell, dispense, or possess or use marijuana. And that's for federal cops to bust you for. She leaves that part out. She's trying to point out to the people that would be signing up for these cards that no, she's not going to be prosecuting anybody that goes after these things, but you got to be aware that it's still illegal federally, and the DEA could still come down on you, still bust you. That's the indication here. I'm so tired of hearing these stories of state officials who just don't understand this very basic tenet of how the United States works. It floors me to think that these people who are supposed to be educated on the law, who are supposed to be representing us and understand how our government functions, don't understand how our government functions when it doesn't go their way. And it's going to continue to go this way as we've got medical marijuana on the ballot in Massachusetts. It's likely to be on the ballot in North Dakota. And there's a referendum to restore medical marijuana in the state of Montana. We got legalization in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. There are just going to be more and more people voting for the liberalization of marijuana laws. And people like this Attorney General and this Maricopa County Sheriff are going to be the dinosaurs who will be extinct in just 10 years from now.
It's 420 back in Idaho, where Russ and Carrie were born. So we have to go connect with our Russ. You know what I mean? Please support these sponsors who support the Russ Belville Show.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Come to Seattle, the greenest city on earth, on September 14th, 15th, and 16th to celebrate the greenery of the Pacific Northwest. That's right, High Times Magazine is hosting the High Times Medical Cannabis Cup in the Emerald City. Top businesses of the cannabis industry will be in attendance, showcasing cultivation gear, paraphernalia, stoner apparel, and more. Check out the finest cannabis products of the medical cannabis industry. Meet High Times cultivation editors Danny Danko and Nico Escondido. They'll teach you how to grow top-grade ganja. And Elise McDonough will be there too. She's the author of the official High Times Cannabis Cookbook. Be there for the High Times Medical Cannabis Cup Awards, when High Times honors the top sativas, indicas, hybrids, edibles, and concentrates submitted by Washington's top dispensaries. And don't forget the High Times Bash for VIPs on Friday night. One major party with top musical guests. Go to medcancup.com for details. Come to Seattle for the High Times Medical Cannabis Cup on September 14th, 15th, and 16th at Fremont Studios.
Man, is that the reefer man? That's the reefer man. I believe he's losing his mind. I think he's lost his mind.
This is a Russ Belville Show news alert. Whatever you do, don't smoke pot. You don't want to turn out to be a loser, like Olympian Michael Phelps, actor Jack Nicholson,
singer Miley Cyrus, rocket scientist Dr. Carl Sagan, pop star Rihanna, actress Cameron Diaz, country legend Willie Nelson, President Barack Obama, Cy Young pitcher Tim Lincecum,
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man? If he says he swam to China and sell you South Carolina, then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
And over 100 million other Americans.
Have you ever met funny reefer man? If he says he walks the ocean, anytime he takes a notion, then you know you're talking to the reefer man.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Rockin' Friday, featuring rock, metal, and the hard edge of alternative country. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, folks, welcome. Rockin' Friday today. Herb Thrasher is out today. He's at the Northwest String Summit, where he's vending right at the moment. So I'm going to take the reins of our Rockin' Friday for today. And also for our Herb Thrasher Flower Hour later on tonight, 8 o'clock Pacific time. I think we might run a replay. We'll see. We'll see what's going to happen with that. Got to talk to Herb. But anyway, for today's Herb Thrasher Flower Hour Rockin' Friday tune, I wanted to bring you a song from one of the bands that's going to be playing at the Seattle Hemp Fest. And to tell you the truth, I don't know too much about them, so we'll just get right to the music. It's Gypsy Hawk with The Fields for Rockin' Friday.
Dear Dad, how should I say this? You know how you enjoy a drink after work? Well, in many ways, I'm just like you. I have a good job, I work hard, but when I get home, I prefer to relax with marijuana instead of alcohol. They're a little similar, but marijuana is actually less damaging to my health, and frankly, I don't feel like crap the next day. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk.
TalkItUpColorado.org. Start your conversation about marijuana, paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol.
I like it like that.
Well, I don't know what you came to do, or what we came to keep the funk alive.
Oh yeah, we're definitely keeping the funk alive here at National Cannabis Radio. This is Big Daddy Fink, and I want you to join me at the Funky Roller Rink, where it's always a funky party, y'all. Every Thursday night, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. Keep it funky, keep it funky, keep it funky, keep it funky.
Let's get the session started, cause it's 420.
Since 1974, High Times Magazine has been the chronicle of the cannabis community. The Russ Belville Show visits with West Coast editor Dave Bienenstock for a look forward to the next issue and the next marijuana events in our High Times preview. Yo!
That's right, it's High Times, second Friday of the month, and we're headed down to the Bay Area to talk with Dave Bienenstock, the West Coast editor. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, Russ, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, good. We've got a picture of the next cover. This will be the October magazine that's coming out soon. High Times, and then in big old letters, Dabs. So how do you feel about the new Dab cover coming out?
Well, I mean, I think, being at our events lately and talking to our community, it's an issue that everybody's talking about, and that certainly means that High Times has to cover it and keep people informed. So I'm definitely excited that we are playing that role. High Times, as I think your intro says, we've been the chronicler of the cannabis community for 40 years, and this is definitely what's new and emerging, and so we think it's just important to cover it in a responsible way to try to answer the questions that people have.
Yeah.
And it's certainly too big to ignore at this point.
Yeah, it's something. It's kind of interesting too with the cannabis community across the nation in that out here in the West, this is a year-old, even a 2-year-old story. Really, I mean, it's pretty well established out here. People in the Midwest, in the South, have heard of it, but have never really seen it in action or seen what's going on with it. So, this is interesting that we got to kind of get this information across to the people out there that don't know too much about it. One parallel that was brought up to me by our folks in the chat room, I mentioned that we were doing the cover here, the first ever High Times cover that had dabs on it, and someone mentioned, hey, I have an old High Times from the 80s that had cocaine on it. And so there's some that are kind of worried here, like, is this a new wave, a new wave that's going to come in as far as dab use that kind of did like what cocaine use did in the 80s? It kind of brought marijuana down. Did anybody worry about that in deciding on this cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you read the article, it's written by my colleague, Bobby Black.
Oh, good.
And he's been, we've been having seminars at our Medical Cannabis Cups. We've been having seminars, on this subject, the last couple times. Actually, the last in Denver, we had one in Los Angeles. In San Francisco, we're going to have one in Seattle coming up. And they've been so well attended, and there's been so many questions. And so, this article is really coming out of that. At all the seminars, we've had a medical doctor there. We've had people who are talking about how you can do this with solventless hash, and we've had the people who make these dabs with the solvents. So we're really trying to create a forum for everyone to weigh in in a responsible manner. Obviously the high times cocaine years were well before my time there. It's not something that we advocate in any way. We're a magazine about drugs that advocates for cannabis, and I think that that's an important line for people to understand. There's no subject that adults should not be informed about. There's aspects of the drug war. We are against the war on drugs in all its forms. So you can say that drug legalization does not mean drug advocacy, but obviously High Times does advocate for cannabis. That doesn't mean we think everyone should use it. It means that we think everyone should have that choice, and it means that everybody that there's benefits. I mean, there's just flat-out benefits to cannabis, and I don't think that that's an across-the-board case that anyone would make. As far as the dabs thing goes, it's something that we have to cover because it's important to people and they have a lot of questions. Even within the staff, I can tell you, there's a lot of different opinions about it.
Yeah, it's all over. The opinions range from folks that are very anti-solvent to folks that are pro-solvent. There's folks that have a problem with just the whole hash altogether being, more potent or maybe possibly more difficult to handle. It's an emerging subject, and I'm glad High Times has taken this up. Now, Dave, as we're looking at the magazine here too, we got another headline up here that's kind of provocative to me: why LEDs no longer suck. And for a long time we'd interviewed Danny and some other folks that would say, yeah, LED technology has not really come along. Is this article telling us that now it's ready for prime time?
I think the people with a real abiding interest in that subject, the growers will. I say this not in a self-serving way, but you're going to have to read the article and decide for yourself if that's a direction you want to go in your own cultivation. I know that for a long time, obviously, people make these LED lights and they're making claims and they want you to buy them. Right. And our responsibility is to the growers and to help keep them well informed. So for a while, and this comes out of our cultivation department, which I'm not directly a part of, but what I hear from them was always, LEDs is an exciting technology. It's going to get better like any technology where it becomes more efficient, less expensive. And I guess what they're saying now is it's reaching the point where LEDs have advanced enough to be a good option for some people in some uses. And so, that's obviously exciting because for me personally, one of my interests is seeing the carbon footprint of indoor cannabis come down. Yeah. I mean, eventually what I'd like to see is legalized cannabis, which I think is going to be largely grown in greenhouses. But the situation we're in now is, and I understand all the reasons for it, but those high-intensity lights use a lot of energy. So that costs you money as a grower. That becomes one of your main concerns of, you have to cool the room. It's a lot more involved to use those high-intensity lights. So if you are able to effectively use less intense lights, that's going to be a benefit across the board for growers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the carbon footprint part of it too, because there was one estimate I heard that 1% of American generated electricity goes toward indoor marijuana growing, something like that, or maybe it was California, I forget which.
No, it's much higher in California. Yeah. I mean, those numbers are shocking, and it's like I'm not here to be a scold. It's like we're being forced indoors by prohibition. Right. But I think at the same time we have to be honest with ourselves about that energy usage, the costs of it to society, and it's just another argument for legalization, and it's a great one to make. We want the mainstream environmentalist community can get behind that argument and support that argument, but I just don't think widely people understand just really how large that energy usage is, and that it's all unnecessary. Outdoor cannabis plants have a negative carbon footprint because that's not entirely true. I'm being a little facetious, but of course, they absorb carbon dioxide. So, it's quite a contrast between outdoor plants and and indoor. And I guess if I could just get back to the dab thing for one second. What I want, speaking of arguments for legalization, my personal concerns with the dab phenomenon are twofold. One, on the production end, you do this wrong and you could kill yourself and kill your neighbors. I mean, there's no other way to put it. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. And even if you do know what you're doing, you know, I don't want to tell people what to do, but I will tell them what not to do. And it's like, this is not a hobby. It's not a game. It's not something to play around with for a day. You're using volatile chemicals in a way that could lead to your death, to the death of your neighbors, and that in and of itself is terrible. Secondfold to that, it makes the job of those of us and all of us trying to legalize marijuana a lot harder when these things happen. And so I think that the argument we need to be ready to make every time this happens is this is happening because marijuana is illegal. Yes. And that's true. But I hear people saying, oh, well, if that guy wasn't such an idiot. True, but that's not the argument to make. And my God, if somebody lost a loved one because of this, they don't want to hear that shit.
Right.
I could say that, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no FCC here.
They don't want to hear that shit. They don't want to hear anything, obviously. Nothing but what society needs to hear is, listen, this is completely unregulated activity, and that is what is leading to dangerous conditions, and that is what's going to lead to these incidents. The other area of concern for me is for the user and consumer of these products. It's not well regulated. It's not well understood. Once it reaches you, the consumer, you know, there's health concerns, and the article really gets into this. There's health concerns, you know, and people will say to you, oh, well, if you make it right, it's the cleanest, purest, best medical product available. Maybe so. But do you know that it was made well? Do you know what's in it? Was it lab tested before it got to you for contaminants?
Right.
People need to ask themselves these questions.
You know, I think it's a helpful analogy to this is thinking of alcohol prohibition. In the days of alcohol prohibition, that forced people that were brewing to go make stills out in the woods to brew something that was more potent because they could get better profit and easier smuggleability out of it. We're seeing the same thing with hash oil. It gets more profit. It's easier to smuggle. A lot of cops don't recognize it. And prohibition is what led us that way.
Yeah, and, you know, the same way you had moonshine, you know, shiners blowing themselves up in the woods, and you had people going blind from a bad batch of white lightning. No offense to the people who made white lightning specifically. You know, we're seeing the same thing. And, you know, in my heart, it's like marijuana is such a wonderful product in its natural form that it concerns me to see this becoming ubiquitous. I personally think that the image of people using blowtorches to take a globular, unrecognizable substance and smoke it is, from a metrics point of view, a difficult one for this community. I think that when people are just kind of getting used to the idea that this is a natural plant, that it looks like how it came out of the ground, that, you know, that to make this next step, and that doesn't mean that, you know, people should only do what society thinks they should, but at the same time, let's be honest about how that looks to the wider world, and what some of the consequences of that is.
All right. Well, we're speaking with Dave Bienenstock, West Coast editor for High Times Magazine. The October cover will be coming out. October issue will be on the newsstand soon. High Times' first Dabs issue. Now, I know you also have other great stuff in High Times, music reviews, celebrity interviews, and so forth. What else can we look forward to in that issue?
I wish I had it in front of me. I was just looking for it. We have Summer Fridays at High Times, so I am outside of the office. I thought I had a copy with me, and I don't. And, of course, we're always working a few issues ahead. So I'm trying to. So one thing for our sports fans, there's an interview with Oil Can Boyd, who was a legendary pitcher with. I am a New York Yankees fan, so I can remember not liking him. But I mean, if you pitch for the Red Sox, the more I don't like you, the better you are. And he's talking very, very frankly about his own cannabis use, about how he felt it was an enhancement to his performance as a pitcher, and basically he says that at one point I can't give an exact quote, but he says, the Red Sox management made sure I had all the pot I needed to pitch as well as I could. And I think that says it all. We look at these guys in the Olympics, Phelps, whether he's still a cannabis user or not, it's like the fastest man in the water, the fastest man on earth are known cannabis users. If I was the coach of any kind of athletic team and I had the choice between somebody who I knew was a drinker to relax or somebody who used cannabis to relax, I wouldn't have to think about it for a second. So, it's a very interesting interview. Obviously, we're coming up on the exciting part of the baseball season. So, really cool to have that interview in the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to that. And folks, you can also get High Times online by going to hightimes.com. They've got an online version if you're interested in saving some more trees. You can subscribe that way. And Dave, last thing we better talk about here, you guys are going for the first time up to Seattle for a medical cannabis cup. Give us a preview of that.
Oh, I mean, we're excited. Seattle is an amazing city. It'll be our first time there. You have a mayor who is all about legalizing marijuana. We'll have the Seattle city attorney is going to be on one of our seminar panels talking about the legalization initiative up there. And, of course, all the wonderful cannabis in really one of America's most cannabis-friendly cities at this point. I just had my first visit up there, and there's so much excitement in that community, and we're happy to be a part of it.
I'll tell you, being headquartered here in the Pacific Northwest, I can tell you when it rains 9 months out of the year, it gives you plenty of time to cultivate.
Yeah, well, great coffee, great cannabis. It will get you through a rainy day, and that's I think the Seattle strategy. So the event is September 15th and 16th. All the information is at medcancup.com, and like I said, Washington is going to vote on I-502 to legalize marijuana for adults. I know it's been a controversial topic within our community. And I could just say we're going to have a legalization panel with Allison Holcomb, who is one of the chief proponents from the ACLU. Pete Holmes is Seattle city attorney right now. They'll both be speaking in favor of of I-502, and then we will have representatives, people from the cannabis community who are opposed to it. And again, it's like I think High Times' job, particularly in these controversial subjects, is to look at it with a real depth and to look at it with the eyes of our community. When the New York Times, and I'm not picking on them, but says, oh, well, we're going to, look at both sides of the marijuana issue. One of those sides is marijuana is evil and we'll kill it. That's not a side. That's lie. That's bullshit. And so, what I love about being at High Times is we throw out those faulty assumptions that are based on illogical premises, and we say, well, let's look at this issue in depth, but let's look at it from the starting point of people who understand cannabis. And so that's the conversation I'm really looking forward to having in Seattle. And I think that hopefully we can bring a lot of information to light and let people make up their own minds based on the facts, rather than based on a comment you read on an article by somebody who is anonymous and may or may not have actual facts to share.
Exactly. Well, we look forward to that. Seattle High Times Medical Cannabis Cup. Go to medcancup.com. High Times Magazine at hightimes.com. There's also the High Times Medical Marijuana Quarterly. Look for that. Dave Bienenstock's a senior editor for High Times Magazine out on the West Coast, and thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, always a pleasure, Russ. I will talk to you in a month if I don't see you soon.
Going to be at HempFest?
I will not be making HempFest this year, but
we'll see you at the Cup,
High Times will be well represented.
All right, we'll see you up at the Cup. Good day.
Later on.
We come back, time for a little ranting. Be right back.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. That's what you got to do. Liberate your mind.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, welcome back, folks. 50 after the hour, and I got to bring up some more of this anti-legalization nonsense from the opponents of marijuana, and a little bit from some of its alleged supporters. But first, let's talk about the true enemy, the prohibitionists out there that want to continue putting us in a cage for our use of marijuana. One such group is known as CADCA, C-A-D-C-A. They are the Community Anti-Drug Coalition of America. And I want to give a big thanks out to NORML's Paul Armentano for giving me the heads up on this. They have just released a position statement on medical, scare quotes, medical marijuana and marijuana legalization. So you can kind of think of this as the playbook that the prohibitionists are going to be using in the face of 3 states attempting legalization. That's Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. And in breaking news, you heard it here first on the Russ Belville Show, 4 states attempting medical marijuana legalization. We've got Massachusetts on the ballot already. North Dakota turned in more than enough signatures. They'll probably be on the ballot. Montana's got an initiated referendum that's going to be on the ballot to put medical marijuana back the way it was. And breaking news, Arkansans for Compassionate Care, that's a hard one to say, announced today that they turned in, 67,000 some odd signatures when they only need 32,000 signatures, something like that, but a huge number. We'll report more on that on Monday's Daily Cannabis Chronicle. But that makes 7 states now that are going to be doing some sort of marijuana legalization or medicalization measure. So buckle up, folks, as I take you through the distortions, falsehoods, and scaremongering you're going to see and hear for the next 3 months. By the time we're through, you'll be shooting down these positions like Kim Rhodey knocking down clay pigeons. First, their very first thing right out of the gate here from CADCA, they say there is a direct correlation between medical marijuana initiatives and decreases in perception of harm and social disapproval among teens. Right? Their big point is there's a direct correlation. We pass medical marijuana, teens don't think pot use is risky, and they don't think it's bad to do. So when they make this talking point, the prohibitionists are going to point out that 22.7% of U.S. high school seniors think pot smoking occasionally presents a great risk of harm. And that's down from 2003 when 26%, 26.6 to be exact, of seniors thought pot smoking was so risky. So they're trying to say, look, oh my God, the kids that think pot smoking is risky has dropped almost 4%. And then they'll follow that up with a chart that says, see, when kids think it's risky, they don't use it as much. And when they think it's not risky, they use it more. Problem is, the term direct correlation is a pretty strong statistical term. Fortunately, you and I can look at the entire catalog of the Monitoring the Future survey that they get this data from, and not just cherry pick the numbers from 2010 and 2003. Let's see what happened to teen perception of great risk and social disapproval of occasional marijuana smoking as 17 states and the District of Columbia passed medical marijuana laws from 96 to 2012. In 96, when California passed medical marijuana, the teen perception of risk was 25.9%. That went up 0.3 from the year before. But in 98, when Washington, Oregon, and Alaska passed medical marijuana, it dropped 1.5%. In 1999, when Maine passed, dropped another 0.5%. In 2000, when Nevada, Hawaii, and Colorado passed, dropped another 0.5%. So they're saying, oh my God, more states have passed medical marijuana, their perception of risk has gone down. But then in 2004, something interesting happens. In 2004, when Vermont and Montana passed medical marijuana, perception of risk went up 2 points. In 2006, when Rhode Island passed it, it went up 0.5 point. In 2007, when New Mexico passed it, it went up 1.2 points. And then in 2008, it went down 1.3. In 2010, it went down 1.3. And in 2011, it went down 1.8. But the point here is it has gone up and down. And they only seem to point it out when it's going down. Primarily, what I would say the major difference is that from 1990 to 2000, we had President Clinton in office. In 2000 through 2008, we had President Bush in office. And in 2008 to 2012, we've had President Obama in office. And their pronouncements on marijuana and their actions on marijuana have had more to do with teen risk or disapproval than anything else. Oh, and speaking of those disapproval numbers, those also have gone down, gone up, gone down, gone up as different states have passed medical marijuana. So for that direct correlation, when medical marijuana passed, sometimes risk went up, sometimes risk went down, sometimes disapproval went up, sometimes it went down, and 4 times out of 11, those two figures went in opposite directions. So much for direct. Now, the prohibitionists might try to flip this on you and say, okay, yeah, sure, it went up and down, but look at the overall trend. Look at the overall trend. Since medical marijuana passed, risk perception has decreased 3.2 points and disapproval has decreased 2 points. And that teen pot use has increased over the past 2 years. These are true. The perception of risk among teenagers for occasional pot smoking has dropped 3.2% since 3.2 points since the advent of medical marijuana. And their disapproval of occasional marijuana use has dropped 2 points since the advent of medical marijuana. And their use has gone up in the past 2 years. And this is kind of uncomfortable to talk about because nobody wants to talk about teens smoking pot. Nobody wants them smoking pot, but some of them are going to. And this is where we have to turn the tables on them and say, all right, what do you propose to reduce teen pot smoking? Lying to them about the risk? Because it's really no surprise that the teen perception of risk from pot smoking is declining because they're beginning to learn the truth that smoking pot isn't going to turn their brain into a fried egg, it's not going to cause them to melt into a couch, and it's not going to make their cartoon girlfriend leave them for an alien. Look, if I told you that eating Pop Rocks and drinking Coke would make your stomach explode, and then a week later I told you read Snopes and discovered that's an urban legend, your perception of the risk of Pop Rocks and Coke would decline dramatically, wouldn't it? That you might even try some. And that's the point we're trying to make here with marijuana. We have lied to kids for so long about what extreme harm they're going to get from marijuana that naturally, as they discover the truth, that it's a medicine, it's a mild relaxant, doesn't cause hangovers, very low risk of dependence, sure, they're going to perceive it's less risky than when they're told it's the gateway to heroin and causes as much damage to the brain as being on Bikini Island during an A-bomb blast, like Ronald Reagan said. So yeah, of course their perception of risk has gone down, and unfortunately, this also may mean a slight uptick in teen use. But then you pivot on this and you show them the numbers from those same Monitoring the Future surveys about teen alcohol and tobacco use. With alcohol, we have a product that is addictive, advertised, and celebrated in our culture. But with our 21 drinking age, strict ID carding, and responsible use messaging, 12th grade use of alcohol has declined from lifetime use rates in the 90% ranges in the 1980s to an all-time low of 70% in the latest Monitoring the Future survey. With tobacco, fully 1/3 of the people who try tobacco become addicted to it, and it's a drug that's available to 18-year-olds. Yet, the 12th grade lifetime use rates of cigarettes have dropped from 75% in the mid-1970s to an all-time low of 40% in the latest Monitoring the Future survey. And while the lifetime marijuana use rates for 12th graders have risen in the past 2 years, they've only risen 7 times in the past 16 years of medical marijuana. In fact, lifetime use rates had a decline of 6 straight years from 2002 to 2007, and they're still 4.1 points lower than the first year of California's medical marijuana law, and they're still 24.7 points lower than their peak in the late 1970s. We've discovered with dangerous and addictive drugs that they can be legal for adult recreational use, and through honest education, adult sales outlets, and ID carding, we can drastically reduce teen use. Why wouldn't that work with marijuana? All right, folks, we got more to debunk. This CADCA thing's quite long. We'll take it into hour 2. Plus, we're going to take a look at some of the latest scribblings from the No on I-502 crowd. And we'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. For Brian the Red, Wiz Khalico, and Cannabis Carry, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Oh, and by the way, happy birthday, Stephanie Lee. 808 rules. Take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.